Hi, welcome everyone to Together in Happiness's webinar, Positive Steps for Preventing Divorce and Building a Lasting Love. And a very special welcome to our guest, Howard Markman. And I am ecstatic about the fact that this webinar is taking place for a number of reasons, especially because it's on many an auspicious day. But I want to tell you a little bit first before introducing Howard about Together in Happiness. Together in Happiness is a resource center. We started in 2011 for promoting awareness, recognition, and advocacy for the critical importance and benefit of marriage education, enrichment, coaching. We work with Jewish couples at all stages in Israel and in English-speaking countries. And whether you're engaged, newly married, or any stage, the truth is, marriage education benefits everybody. It benefits society. It benefits couples for certain, but not only just couples in specific times, but couples at all different stages. And that's essentially what we try to accommodate, because marriage education to us is the key to marriage engagement. So that with that as a background, one of the things that we're privileged is to offer webinars. And tonight is a very special one indeed, because I have the privilege of presenting Howard Markman, who is the Distinguished Professor of Psychology at the University of Denver and a founder of a very special program, PrEP, Prevention Relationship Education Program, that our nonprofit has the privilege of distributing in Israel. And he is also the author of a newly published fourth edition of the bestseller, Fighting for Your Marriage. And so that without further ado, I would like to welcome Howard to our webinar. But I also want to just say as a caveat that this is going to be a little different format than our formal webinar that we've done in the past, and more of a fireside chat for more intimacy. And we're going to be doing it on a question and answer basis where I'm going to be the moderator. However, I also encourage each of you, some of you have actually sent in some questions that we for certain are going to address. But for anyone else to please use the Q&A button and indicate whatever questions you want, because again, we want to make it so that you feel you walk out with tools and tips, and that you're making it as meaningful as possible and as family as possible. So on that basis, my first question to you, Howard, is
first of all, Susan, hold on.
Yes.
First of all, thank you for inviting me. Glad to be here, and hello to your audience.
Well, I'm more than I've been anxiously anticipating this day for weeks, ever since we started talking about it, I think back in July or something, and so that it's actually here. Okay, so now can I ask you the first question? Okay. I know that you have a PhD in psychology, but how did you get involved in marriage education? And if you could just kind of give a little definition of how you picture, the universal application of marriage education and who it benefits. But first of all, how you got involved.
Well, just started doing research in grad school on what makes for a successful relationship. We discovered a lot of this research is in the Fighting for Your Marriage book. And then based on that, we developed a program called PrEP, the Prevention and Relationship Education Program, that when I was in grad school, I developed an early version of PrEP with colleagues Scott Stanley and Frank Floyd. We tested it out, had positive results with a small sample, and then went to Bowling Green University, where I continued to work with Scott, and we had a big grant to do a full-scale test. We were randomly assigned people to taking the PrEP program versus a number of control groups. And PrEP is essentially the Cadillac version, if I may say so, of relationship and marriage education programs. And the basic goal of PrEP and other research-based relationship education and marriage education program is to teach couple skills and principles that research hours and others have found to be associated with successful relationships of all sorts and kinds, given the diversity in relationships today. And I don't know about in Israel, but here in the States and across most Western countries, the marriage rates are going down. So that's why we talk about relationship and marriage education. And of course, here in the States, over 50% of kids are born what we call out of wedlock. So it's really important to try to reach as many couples as possible who are interested in learning these skills.
One thing that when you mentioned about the prep program that and also the beginnings of it, my core relationship with Howard dates back to 2011 when he was the keynote speaker for our first international conference on marriage education in Israel. And then he was the keynote speaker when we went to the Knesset for a landmark Knesset seminar for pre-marriage education. So Howard's been the go-to person for our entire movement in Israel. And so when you were mentioning about history of prep, it was very important to me when we started. I did all this research and saw that what was the premier program that kept coming up, prep. And I said, you know what? We've got to bring in the premier program because, that's why settle for second if you can go for first. So Howard's been, our chaperone through our entire movement here, which is why some of the issues that have come up really have to do with when I take marriage education as a passion and as a movement, then it's always been associated with Howard Markman. To me, the father of marriage education is just, a title. And
you're the mother of marriage education for all the Jewish people in the world, above non-Israel. And by the way, for those who are Israeli citizens or know people in Israel over the last year and month or so, and our hearts and thoughts and prayers go out to everyone who's been affected. And I'm sure everyone in Israel and beyond has been affected by the terrorist activities and aftermath. So our thoughts and prayers remain with you.
Thank you. On that point, one of the things that there is, different gradations of the prep program and the internet program version, your version of the e-prep, a statement was made that if you had to distill everything down to one item that would cross the whole spectrum, it's the 3 keys. And that has always kind of been of interest to me. And could you kind of give a little elaboration how you came up with this whole notion of the 3 keys and what the examples or what they symbolize for the program?
Right. So we start this version of the book really focusing on what we call the 3 keys. The keys really spoke to us from the research and our experience working with thousands and thousands and thousands of couples and professionals around the world. And they're just kind of like mnemonics to keep in mind when you're thinking about your relationship. So the first key is really thinking about relationship, and it's called do your part. So the goal here is you have control over what you can do for your relationship. And it's best to invest in your relationship on an ongoing basis. So we can talk more about that. So the second key is make it safe to connect. So make it safe to connect. So it's really, really, really important when you're talking to be able to talk without fighting. And I think really what would be of most principles that we can convey to your audience is how important it is to make time and use good communication and conflict management skills to address the inevitable issues in relationships and marriage today. And the third key, in some ways, may be the most important and most interesting to a lot of people. We call it decide versus slide. So, and if you're interested in learning more about this, my friend and co-author of the Fighting for Your Marriage book has a website called Slide versus Decide, and where we post lots of interesting blogs. And the basic principle is when you're making important decisions in life, like having a baby, getting married, deciding where you're going to live, that you really actively decide together about that decision and follow our kind of prep principles of first banning trying to solve anything and just having safe time to talk about your thoughts and feelings about whatever the issue is. And for example, we find that couples who just kind of slide into living together, for example, they just, the lease is up, or, they're going to want to save some money. Couples who live together in our research who have not decided to get married, if they do get married, have a substantially higher risk of relationship problems and divorce. So those are the three keys.
Well, I especially like the emphasis on safety, because I feel like that kind of again, maybe it speaks to me because of our vulnerability here in Israel. But it just seems like that, when in looking at the prep and the three kinds of safety, it just seems to really, touch upon so many dimensions of our lives, which is why, the kind of sliding into, I'm going to decide to slide into question 3, of that we know in marriage that conflicts are inevitable, as you said, and that I know you've mentioned in your work that it's not the presence of the conflicts, but it's how couples manage it most. And
right.
So that on that vein, I know that there are some specific danger signs, whatever you want to call them, pitfalls to avoid, that are kind of the red lines that don't cross into. So, and can you kind of elaborate upon those? Because I know that from my own experience that it kind of is the hard to manage your relationship if you're so busy having to worry about some of these danger signs to avoid.
Sure, the danger signs again emerged from our research and that of others, and we all engage in these danger signs, which are, escalation, fighting destructively, invalidation, name calling, withdrawal, where you don't enter into a difficult conversation or leave it emotionally or physically, and then negative interpretations. But these are just signs we all kind of enter into these things, and when we want partners, when they're starting to see these kind of what we call danger signs or negative interactions, they have some skills to deal with them. For example, calling a timeout. So every couple we work with has a timeout or pause so that the negative interactions, the danger signs, can stop. And then an agreement on that phrase, whatever that may be, that's vitally important for people to be able to stop negative interaction. And then have an agreement that they'll get back to whatever they were fighting about or talking about, trying to identify the issue that's underlying it. Might be trust, might be power, it might be, do you love me? Do you accept me? Do I have any influence in this relationship? Those are deeper issues that are usually underlying a lot of the kind of everyday fights that we have. Who's going to do the dishes? Why didn't you pick up the kids today? And why didn't you do this little thing that I asked you to do? That sort of thing.
Do you
And
find,
then after getting back to the conversation, we think that's a good idea to have a couples meeting regularly and to take an issue if you're facing one and ban solving it, and then each person takes something to use for the floor, just a piece of paper or something. One person has the floor, they're the speaker. They talk about their thoughts and feelings, for a minute or two. Doesn't make much difference. The key is that when I'm talking to my partner, and this works in any relationship, by the way, not just marriage, that my partner is not trying to defend themselves, that I'm talking in an open and honest and humble way. And the goal is for each partner to understand, not agree, but would understand what the other partner is saying. So the goal is to understand rather than to agree or disagree.
I know that it actually, the name of it is the speaker listener technique, which has essentially been, when I think about communication, it's so primary to, the kind of the way of, I know it's a transition way of getting back from timeout into back into normal conversation. But do you find that people adapt to the speaker, to a speaker listener? Does it, it seems that it does take a bit of nuance to be able to really communicate on the level of really understanding. I think, do you
It's
find?
simple and powerful. It's simple and powerful. The rules are very straightforward. And the more you use it, like anything else, you practice a skill in tennis or pickleball or ballet or whatever that may be, the more you practice it and use it, the better you get. The key to speaker listening, and we don't expect people to be using it all the time. What we encourage people to do is that when the regular way they have of talking and dealing with issues is not working, it doesn't have to be after a timeout, but just to kind of engage these skills and set a time to talk about the issues, the disagreements, whatever's going on between the two of them. So it's simple but powerful. But we don't want people to use it when they're upset. It's best to talk, and I like to talk about the phrase talking without fighting, to talk safely. And safety at home, as you mentioned earlier, being safe at home from physical violence. There's no reason for any kind of verbal or physical aggression. And if it happens, that's a danger sign. That's part of escalation and invalidation usually. So that's a good time to get online, take one of your programs that you offer. Online programs seem to be as successful as face-to-face programs in our research. So the idea is just to have a tool in your relationship toolbox to engage, so that you have the confidence you can talk about just about anything safely and without it threatening the stability of the relationship. A lot of couples do this naturally. That's terrific. But this is a tool that when things aren't going well, that people can engage.
What are the top issues that couples are arguing about the most? Like, what do you find in your research that
Money, communication, sex, and then add children for couples who are having children. That comes out in all the research. Doesn't mean that finances are the biggest cause of the problems. In fact, money is one of the things that couples talk about most. But underlying issues in money are deeper issues like power and control and working together as a team, acceptance, and so on and so forth. But that's I don't know if there's any original research in Israel on what Israeli couples are saying their top problem areas. And when we do research on top problem areas, we just kind of take a whole list of common problems and have people rate the intensity independently of those problems on a 0 to 100 scale. And I believe in the Fighting for Your Marriage book, I think there's an example of that scale. There are a lot of kind of quizzes and tests throughout the Fighting for Your Marriage book that couples can take, like a danger sign quiz, a problem quiz, that sort of thing.
When people talk about issues and couples kind of get together, and what happens if one of the questions that came in that I want to ask you to respond to is that a spouse who doesn't wish to participate in any counseling or any of the programs, even like tonight, the webinar, how do you influence them to try new things like this, for example?
Just do it, try it. Say, hey, I learned this interesting skill today in this webinar I took, and it has to do with being able to sit down, have a couples meeting, if that's something you want to try. And if the other person doesn't want to, or whatever, and usually it's going to be, if no one's interested in participating in anything to improve their relationship, then you want to ask that person, what's going on? I have these great ideas about the relationship, and so you might find out something really, really interesting. They might say, you know what, I don't want to talk about our relationship. I love you. Let's just have fun together, raise our family, go through life. I don't want to talk about relationship issues. And for a lot of couples, that's fine.
I think you've said before that men actually like marriage education because that it's not therapy, and so that I from a standpoint of getting gender related, it's interesting to me when you can actually attract the men into wanting to participate, or if it's the female, it still is like something that has to appeal to people, I think, right? In terms of because therapy, if what I understood you to say in the past is so many people don't go to therapist and just go straight to divorce. And so that's why it was kind of the boost for marriage education to be more of a hook that people might find receptivity to. Is that kind of
Right.
true?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think any couple, before they invest the time and resources in couples for marriage therapy, should take a marriage education, relationship education program. And in 60 or 70% of these situations, they will improve their relationship, learn their skills, and so on and so forth. And even if you just have one person in the relationship taking it, then they're applying the skills that's important. Now, relationship education is just as successful. In some cases, the research shows more successful than couples therapy. Couples therapy, at least in most countries we work with, have a lot of barriers to taking it. Now, it may be finances in a lot of situations. It may be just the reluctance to talk to a stranger. And men in general probably have that sense. But both men and women and them and they and all the diversity in the world now in terms of how people see themselves, who they love and how they love and all that sort of thing. That, most of us, really don't want to just go in and spend money talking about relationship problems. What we do find is that when people understand what marriage education is and what prep is and your programs and Together in Happiness are, it's really fun. It's kind of like taking a dance class together or learning how to play pickleball together, kind of learning skills and principles. And most people, when they go take the program, online or in person or a combination of both, they really enjoy it. They say it's fun. They say they use the skills and principles later on when they need it.
I think
Nothing
that
against therapy. I mean, I do therapy, and it's an important resource. But one of the interesting things, and I'll put this out there, other people can agree or disagree. Most relationship and marriage education out there tends to be research-based, while most couples therapy programs or therapists are not necessarily using research-based programs. So any consumer should make sure that not only is your therapist or relationship educator, trained in what you want them to help you do, but that what they're learning is based as much in research and theory as possible.
Well, as a non-mental health professional myself, the appeal to me was the fact that I could facilitate based upon the criteria of the curriculum. And so
Let me jump in. You're really hitting on, Susan, maybe the major advantage in terms of extending the reach of relationship and marriage education, because the person who's leading the program, it can be anybody. And you don't have to be trained in any general form of couples therapy. Basically, that we train people to do the program, like the prep program. And it doesn't take too long to do it, and most people can learn how to do it. And a lot of it's, I'm invested in it, I want to learn, I want to help people, and so on and so forth. And we find in some studies that the people who may be a professional, like a clergy or a therapist, or just may be anyone who's interested in facilitating relationship education, that they actually do better in their outcome with couples than a therapist doing the program.
I think that
the reach of relationship education, and part of the future of relationship education is that we have 7 billion people, or will soon, in the world that can actually be leaders. Well, maybe 5 billion. I don't know. I lost count.
I think that that's what, to me, is the beauty of being able to learn skills and from people you trust, basically, because I think that right.
Yeah, trust is important. And that's, again, one of the real advantages of marriage education is that the person who's leading or working with you is usually knows your situation. They may not know you personally, but they be a member of your religious organization or community or a mosque or church or synagogue. We do a ton of work with the military. I wish the military would fund programs. Anyone from the military and the Knesset listening, you will find that the major job that IDF and other military forces, the goal of that is to fight and win Israel's battle. When the military provides marriage education programs, relationship education in the States, we have a program called Got Your Back, which is basically this program for individuals. And the goal of the military and the Department of Defense were putting billions of dollars over years in trying to get these skills and principles in the hands of our fighting forces in this country, in the US. And obviously our countries work together. And, we find that if you invest, let's say, $1 in helping your fighting force learn just basic relationship skills, when they're happier at home, they're going to be doing better fighting battles. When they're getting along with their teammates and fighting battles or planning battles, defending the country, just being able to talk without fighting, listen to each other, to have these basic skills. So one of the big issues in marriage education in Israel, from my standpoint, there's no external funding for it. Marriage education works the best when the government realizes, or the military realizes, or a company realizes that this is a good thing for my employees, my workforce, my congregation. And, that if the billions and billions of dollars, that we're investing in the States and Israel, the cost of a F-16 or a drone or, shooting down missiles coming in, firing missiles going on, the infinitesimal percent that the government or the military can invest in, hiring you and others to, develop programs, apply programs for all the people entering the military. So when young folks who, in Israel come back, go up and I think they take a vacation after high school and then travel around and then enter the military. That point of entering the military, add a day of relationship education, and that will pay off in major dividends. So I'm done.
It sounds good to me. It's
fire for you, but
it's always been on my agenda still. Now, I guess getting back to gender again, as we talked about men and female, I think one of the issues that comes up is that women say, I just want to talk, and he wants to fix it and immediately go into problem solving. And so that can you kind of, I know that I love the problem solving methodology, by the way. And, but can you talk a little bit about once couples start getting into, again, some of those issues, whether in fact, what tools, like when would they get involved in problem solving?
I'm going to question our research. Others indicate that at least in the United States, I have to assume it's the same in Israel, that both men and women, when they're trying to help someone, will go for a solution. Doesn't matter. Not just we're trained, we're problem solving focused. There's a problem, let's try to solve it. So that's why it's so important for both partners, however they may identify, and so much diversity in terms of how to love, who to love, when to love, if to love out there, that the key is just to kind of mutually agree that you're going to ban problem solving when starting to talk about something. That if there's one general principle that's in my top 3, that's one of them. When you're talking about an issue, doesn't matter who you're talking to, just ban solution. I do that all the time. Okay, Susan, we were having this conflict about what time to start this or what to do, blah, blah, blah. So, okay, let's forget about trying to solve it. What's your side of it? Okay, I get it. What's my side of it? Okay, then if we want to move to problem solution, that's great. But when I was on the Oprah Winfrey show a little bit ago, decades maybe, that both Oprah and I agree that most issues in relationships, 70 to 80%, maybe more, all we need to do about that is just to have good, safe communication.
I want to speak of another question that came in, and which has to do with issues and on this point. The question is the following. continuing in marriage after 50 years, when the only thing in common is the family of married children and many grandchildren, how to build trust when it's been destroyed?
Well, in that situation, and this is for any relationship, 50 years, 30 years, 40 years, 20, whatever, that is, if there's an issue of trust, then, are that talking about affairs or people lying and that sort of thing. So, two things for couples over 50 years. Now, first of all, I don't believe that's the only thing you have in common. You must have tons of things in common. And having children in common, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, planning fun things to do with them together, and so on and so forth, things that you enjoy, I enjoy, both of us enjoyed. So, I think that's great. Mazel tov to couples married 30, 40, 50 years and staying together, raising families, contributing to the community. And, there's lots of ways to have a successful relationship. So, and one of the key PrEP and our Fighting for Your Marriage book is that too often couples just do not be focused on the positive connections, making an effort to have fun and talk as friends and just do fun things together, take a walk. So, for this couple who's saying they have nothing in common, first of all, you can take any couple in the world, send them to me on Zoom, and if their major problem has had nothing in common, 15 minutes later, they won't feel that way anymore.
I love it. I love it. But a lot of it, I think, does go back to expectations, because one of the areas that I have personally found fascinating is the whole discussion on when, the type of expectations that lead to disappointment, those that lead to, mutuality. I really don't feel like enough of us, and I include myself, really sit down before we get married and say, let's really have a powwow on expectations. So they kind of keep creeping in, and so can you talk a little bit about your research on expectations and how we could maybe manage them a little better?
Well, the most important thing, we all have expectations about what we want in a relationship. It's tied into what we want in life, of course. And, what you're saying, if your expectations are really, really high, so if you're going into marriage thinking you're going to have sex 17 times a day, except on the Sabbath or maybe on the Sabbath, that's a high and unrealistic expectation. Now, that one's pretty obvious. So, it's a good thing. And we have a structure in our, Fighting for Your Marriage book. I would imagine just about all couples in Israel, going through mandatory pre-marriage education, which I understand is delivered by the clergy there, which has some strengths and some weaknesses. That I am, sure that couples get a chance to, go through what do you want in terms of where to live, or how many kids do you want? These are pretty important things to talk about, on an ongoing basis, before one gets married. And most couples do that naturally. As you're getting to know someone, you're starting to understand who they are, what their expectations are, things that are, mutually important. Like when we're talking about marriage, big one, are we going to have a family? Do we want to have kids together? If yes, okay. When do we want to start having kids? Okay, yeah, want to have kids within your 5. Okay, well, how is that going to affect our jobs and our careers over time? Are we both open to flexibility? What kind of support do we have out there in the community? And one of the things about Israel, not so much the United States, I would say, at least certain parts of Israel, is that there's a strong commitment to marriage that kind of evades. It's part of the culture, and and I think that's a good thing. That being pro-marriage and pro having kids and being healthy and happy will benefit individuals. They'll live longer, they'll be happier, they'll make more money, their kids will do better, their grandkids will do better, and the country will do better, prosper, that the individuals will just be better citizens.
Actually, the type of pre-marriage education really does not exist in any structured fashion, nor is it mandated. What is mandated is the having to use what they call a particular term of purity of going to the mikveh before before marriage. And most of the time, there is not time for any discussion on marriage principles. I mean, it's getting more a little vote, but it kind of snuck into it because they have a certain amount of time that they have to learn the laws of Jewish intimacy. That's what's mandated. And so it's it's a plus and a minus because it kind of leaves a vacuum for those discussions on expectations and things that you might think. Because again, there is a feeling of people like that the goal is to just get married. And so, like you don't want to sometimes even raise some questions that might raise some flags that if you really spend more time. And that again is one of the things that I like about marriage education is that, slowing it down. Some that, from what I understand, decide not to get married because they, have a chance to actually engage in these kind of communication skills, right? Is that
very few? Some.
Yeah.
Certainly, that's not the goal. But some people might recognize that we're both great people, but we're not, great for each other. That certainly happens. But our perspective in relationship education, we have a whole prep approach, for a marriage approach to couples therapy, offer online face-to-face services here in the States, and that approach to couples therapy. That it's just really important that people have access to these skills and principles in the culture. And being you work harder than anybody I know in the world to help couples in Israel and Jewish couples around the world, and also tough to you. And it's tough. It's tough, and when you're doing it on your own. Again, talking to policymakers who might be interested, I know in the United States and certain states, other parts of the world, people get incentives for getting married. And certainly a lot of countries now, maybe Israel too, have incentives for having children. Now, if that's just available to married people versus anybody, I'm not sure that varies. And, but for example, I'm just going to pick the state of Utah, that if people do a prep program online, they will get discounts on their marriage license, discounts on flowers if they're going to have a wedding. So just having, some incentive, and again, for most of us, the incentive has to do with kind of getting some resources. And, so if people take the course online in Utah and in many other places, that they'll have of course, you have to have funding for that, but get all these positive. When we worked in Singapore, with every single couple getting married in Singapore, they have an opportunity to do the program. And if they do, then there are people wherever they do the program, at least before COVID, they would be, out there offering discounts on flowers and catering and facilities. So it kind of all works together. I think most, it's controversial about, do we want couples to be married before they have kids? But, we know that kids will grow up in a healthy, happy two-parent home, and marriage seems to be the best, but there are other ways. Just do better in life.
So you found, on that point, one of the things that going back to the topic of in terms of steps and positive, one of the things that has resonated is when you said people in the past don't get married to become the best problem solvers or to resolve conflicts, and that then instead they need to have more fun and friendship. And so can you talk a little bit about, fun in the sense, like, for example, I like date nights. I think that they're really something that, you kind of reserve the time. But what have you found in your research that people tend to, bond on the positive side of the coin?
I raise a couple of different themes there, Susan. Number one, most people when they write their wedding ceremony, and certainly in most traditional religiously based wedding ceremonies, there's usually key themes like fidelity and being together to death do we part, that sort of thing that people are making a vow to follow. But in most marriage vows, there's you don't have a statement there. And I promise to use the speaker listener technique till death do we part. People are not getting married to, uh, to deal with problems, but problems are going to be there and are inevitable. So what we, like to think is that, people who kind of go into relationships, marriage with their eyes open and have a commitment to, focus on the positives in the relationship. We spend too much time, talking about the negatives. I think talking 15 to 20 minutes a day about the issues, in your relationship, that's it. I don't have data on that, but that's going to be great. But the key to talking about issues, the key to having fun and having friends, and you're talking about date night, which is one of the ways to do that. I hear from couples all the time, particularly couples who have young kids, who are, may have aging parents who have jobs and careers, is that the relationship gets on the back burner. Okay. And typically people then will only focus on a relationship when it's not going well, fighting. So what date night does and other simple ways of helping the relationship is that it's kind of an agreement, Susan, that it's a time you're putting aside ahead of time for your relationship. And that's critical to make sure there's time in every week or however you're set up that you're going to be just touching base with your partner. How are you doing? How are the kids doing if you have kids? How's mom and dad doing? Your brother or sister? Just kind of talking as friends. And for a lot of couples, it just happens naturally. And that's terrific. They go out and have fun together. But as what we find that over time, especially if you're going to have kids and careers developing, you're going to have less and less and less and less and less time for each other. So it becomes more important to decide to have regular time in your relationship together for fun things. One thing couples can do who feel they have nothing in common or want to increase positive connections, particularly fun, is just take a piece of paper, write down 3 things you like to do for fun that you think would be enjoyable for you and the other person. Write it down, something you can afford, let's say do it next week or 2. I write it down, my partner writes it down, you exchange cards. I make a commitment to make one of those things on my partner's card come true in the next week or 2 weeks. That's my responsibility, and vice versa. So you're absolutely right, focusing on fun and friendship, which happens naturally early on, that it gets more unnatural because people let time and other external things, which are important, of course, but you're going to do much better in your relationship and your life and in your career if you just make sure that the relationship is not on the back burner, but it's up there where you're investing in your relationship on a regular basis. If you're going to be in the stock market, everybody knows that while not licensed to give financial advice, everyone knows that kind of what we call they call dollar cost averaging. Just invest in the investment you think is a good investment or investments over time, the same amount, regardless of, the stock is up or down. And it's the same thing in relationships. You're making a choice of a good investment for most people if you're making a choice to get married. Now, of course, most marriages in the world are still arranged to some degree. And those relationships tend to do better because they have community support and some selection. But anyway, the key is just making your relationship priority. There's a story that one of my colleagues, Gary Smalley, once told about a leader in a workshop, and the leader had small rocks, pebbles, bigger rocks, and really a big rock, and a big jar. And the idea was, okay, well, let's fill this jar. And most participants will start with the pebbles and build. And when it comes to bigger rocks, like the relationship, there's no room anymore. So that's just the visual that we talk about in the book to help people see the importance of just making your relationship not the single priority or even at times the biggest priority, but that there's time in there for your relationship of fun, friendship, talking about issues, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, but speaking of friends, do you feel like that, there's this whole thing about opposites attracting or not? Do you find that, I personally have found the whole subject of personality testing fascinating. from a Myers-Briggs and also from, and so does personality essentially, even if you're not kind of on the same page, do you feel that the compatibility makes that even marriage education could help those that feel like that, our personalities really, I didn't realize how opposite they are until we got married. And
Yeah, you raised some, interesting issues about, you started out with asking the questions, what are the data on similarity versus complementarity? And the research for decades and decades and still today, this is an important kind of cultural question that comes up, that similarity, or most importantly, perceived similarity, is one of the most important predictors of who's going to get together. Not who's going to be successful, but we tend to be attracted to people who, just to be relevant on election day here, though people will be watching this after, that if you go to a dating site here, you're going to say, I will not even want to read your profile if you are a Trumper, make America great person, or if you're a progressive liberal, I don't want to even talk to you. So that kind of screening does go on. Some of that's related to personality. But again, keep in mind one of the basic research findings that you said, Susan, right at the beginning, that the research clearly shows it's not the differences that matter about how they married. There are a lot of couples out there, in Israel, or you're a supporter of the current premier president or someone else, you're going to have differences in that between people, and people have different ways to deal with that. We actually wrote a big article that's out online sometimes, Susan. I'll give you the link, where we talk about how to handle political and other differences. And personality differences are part of that. Some people are more introverted or extroverted. There are 5 basic personality types. Tend to be more, into power and control, and less into giving. So again, what's the issue is it's not the personality types. Though people who are similar in personality tend to be the ones that connect and stay together the way the world is these days, though that is changing. And it's not the differences wherever they come from, but how the partner handles that. I will say that as people more and more and more, people from around the country, around the city, around the region, around the world, online, that people are gonna be coming together who have some built-in differences. If I'm from from California and you're from Alabama, we're gonna be some built-in cultural differences, that sort of thing. So that as people are meeting people, all sorts of people from around the world now, they can if they want, that in some cases are going to be some more challenges. And we talk a lot about that in the Fighting for Marriage book.
And on that point, since I know our time is getting shorter, are there some, what would be your takeaway points for the audience as to what would help them really at the heart of it prevent divorce and build a stronger, lasting love? If you could just, kind of pinpoint some messages for their takeaway.
Take your programs.
Oh, okay. I like that.
And what's into the programs? It's some basic skills and principles that research has shown are related to a successful relationship. Those data are out there. If you want to have a successful career, or if you want to have a successful relationship or marriage, and most of us do, if there's some ways to prepare for that early on, learning things are going to be vital. Why not? Especially if there's not a large course, and especially if there are incentives.
Do you feel that parenting differences that cause conflict, which is essentially becoming a new area, how can those be mitigated so that the couple can really still be on a happy, healthy, trajectory?
There are data that people have different views on child rearing if they're not able to manage those, that's going to have a negative effect over time on the kid. So if you care about your kid, having ways to talk about differences in parenting skills and principles is obviously really, really important. And, a lot of times, we assume we're born to be great lovers, great partners, great parents. And when you do it, you discover that that's not true. So, another great thing, I don't know if you're offering parenting classes, but there are any number of research-based programs out there that help train people to be better parents individually and as a team.
And speaking of parents, in-laws, the classic in-law interference is kind of one of those sleeper issues that we don't talk about, but it is, I'll tell you why it's becoming more important here is because of the soldiers that are going off and the wives having to move in sometimes with the in-laws, and it gets a little bit more dicey now. And so have you found in your research that how to best handle, in-law interference so that the couple can really try to keep their nests together?
Right. Well, in our list of problems, I think in-laws for couples who have them for 10, comes in the middle. It's not one of the top problems. It's kind of a general issue, and it involves in-laws. It also involves other external influences that are there in the relationship. But, focusing about in-laws when, in a situation you're talking about in Israel where, folks are leaving home for extended periods and, there's a partner at home dealing with the kids or dealing with the in-laws more, that sort of thing. That obviously the couple needs to, in some way, this is where, before anyone's deployed anywhere in Israel, especially people who are being called up we do a lot of work with the reserve and guard here, to just give people like a little bit of preparation and how to handle that, the fact you're going to be apart, and to provide some kind of basic skills and principles for talking about, how we're going to parent together, how often we're going to talk to each other, how are you going to handle mom, how are you going to handle dad, if you're living there or not, So, I'm really back. I think it's tragic in Israel and in the States too. The military does support and government does support more than in Israel. But it's just tragic that we prepare people for being the best fighting force in the world to defend Israel. But, as part of that, if you invest like, 0.100% of a budget to relationship, marriage, education, or just giving these skills as you enter the military, as you're called up, I realize if you're being called up, there's something going on, but still, a little bit, I'm sure there's a little bit of training and talk about, how do you handle this thing at home? I'm sure they talk about that as an issue. So again, I'm on my bandwagon about, getting support for your work in Israel.
I thank you. I believe me, I appreciate it. But when you mentioned about the getting on the bandwagon, money is a big issue now because of the fact that, there is less available for, earning incomes. And so what if the couple is actually, you mentioned about money being one of those issues. And so what if the couple also isn't on the same page? Is there any solutions you can suggest as to how to get, even back on the number one issue, so it doesn't consume the relationship?
Well, it's, again, keep in mind when we say the number one issue is the things people report fighting about the most. And, when you think about it, it makes sense, money issues, especially when you don't have enough to meet the family's needs, obviously is a giant issue to face. But couples were able to handle the marriage money issue better are again those people. It's not people who have more money. It's people who are able to talk together, not argue destructively about it, but talk about, I think we need to spend more money on vegetables or on diapers or whatever. And so when there's less of a resource, there's more, conflict about how you use those resources. And, in a family situation, let's say, in Israel, when one person, and maybe both parents are fighting or doing various things related to defending the country, that, being able to, just kind of have a sense that your teammates were working together and, here are things that are normal, how we're going to work together. And again, of course, the, providing, resources for over time for couples who want to be married and to stay married to, have, some incentives to make that happen, those resources. I think all of us want to have a successful relationship over time, but that dream doesn't come true for far too many of us.
In kind of a wrap up, do you find that divorce, for example, is on the rise, less, is there some, like, I know that when the kind of going in circles of when marriage education arose because of the divorce epidemic, is essentially, where do you see that, the culture is going, so that people can kind of, at least in their mind, prepare for, keeping their own home as free of that drift?
Great. You raise a lot of themes and issues there. And I can only speak to the United States. I haven't seen the data in Israel. In the United States, for overall the last 20 years, the divorce rate has been dipping and dipping and dipping, and it's at the lowest level it's been since the evolution and revolutions of the 60s. So the divorce rate is clearly going down. If it were going down in Israel, we wouldn't give you full credit for that. We don't take full credit for the dramatic decrease in divorce over time. I'd say it's cut in half since we started our work, but again, we don't take credit for that. There are a lot of other forces. Now, at the same time, the rates of marriage are also declining, and that varies state and region and so on and so forth. Now, a lot of people who are not married now, but are in relationships, may or will in many cases get married in the future. So, we have data on marriage and divorce, but we don't have data on people who are living together, at least in the States, in our census, that we, certainly divorce rates going down, marriage rates going down. In some cases, marriage rates are going down more than the divorce rates and vice versa, but they're clearly, linked. You don't have a divorce without a marriage, for example. But just because the divorce rates are going down, that doesn't necessarily mean that the quality of relationships are going up. And they're, in some cases, somewhat unrelated, I will say that.
Well, I can tell you, this has been, I could sit and just talk to you for hours. This is a treat for me, but I can see we believe in keeping to our commitment of an hour, so that I really can't thank you enough. For the time, for the plugs, and for just your willingness. And because, that's, for me, you're a worldwide icon and legend. So that having you the opportunity for this fireside chat is a gift. And I know that we all benefited from your wisdom, and certainly from the standpoint of the book. I mean, I read it, I got it from Amazon, so anyone can pick it and buy it from Amazon or Barnes and Nobles or the bookshop I saw. And I read it cover to cover and was mesmerized. So I encourage anyone to, use this fireside chat as the stimulus for going out and buying the fourth edition, because it's full of wisdom. And
the fourth edition, that book is 50% completely new. So make sure you get the fourth edition if you're going to buy it.
That's what I'm saying. I definitely got the fourth edition, and that's what I'm saying. It's I have it in the flesh. Yes, here it is. Here it is, right here. Anyone go and get your order ready from Amazon. And but speaking of,
it was lovely, but people get the idea. I know we have to wrap up, but Susan, thanks for inviting me. Folks in Israel, Susan is just the major supporter of the people I know in wanting couples to have a successful, happy relationship over time. And the more you can invest in your relationship, and Susan's programs, terrific, the better. And Susan knows that I feel she's the person who's worked the hardest to help people in her community in Israel, in her personal community, and the Jewish community around the world. So, I'm proud of your work, impressed, and glad to contribute in any way that I can in a reasonable fashion.
Well, I am so grateful. As a matter of fact, that's why Save the Date is here up here, because we're planning for our Jewish couples married up to 2 years. Speaking of that volatile group that needs it, the foundation, we're actually going and having our first online. So because of all the military thing, we said, you know what, we've got to take this online. So that if anyone knows any of the participants knows people, we'll be sending out messages, we'll be sending out advertisements, but the idea is it's right before Hanukkah. So the idea is to kind of have a pre-Hanukkah treat. And, but we are, connect with us. We have YouTubes, we have websites, we have Instagram, we have Facebook. We've joined the social media generation, and so we want to just find more and more tentacles to spread marriage education. And you've given us such a gift, Howard, that I can't thank you enough. This is the Jewish month it's called Mar Heshvan, which means it's kind of a bitter at following all the Jewish holidays. But the point of the matter is you've added light and you've given so much wisdom. So thank you. And thank you so much for being part of our lives.
Thanks for your good wishes. I'm recovering, and I have to go up, talk to one of my people helping me around in life these days. So we'll talk to you real soon.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being a part of our webinar. We're very grateful to our participants. So thank you, and we hope everyone has a great night. Thank you.
Be safe.